Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the life of Peter. And we're going to talk about the call of Peter today. And Peter's call is recorded in all four Gospels. And yet each call is a little um, different, or at least shares with us different details, and I think in some ways different episodes. What the Bible account makes clear is that his call didn't happen in just a second, but it took a little time. We know from John's gospel, which we've already talked about when we talked about his little brother Andrew, that the first two disciples who followed Jesus were Philip and Andrew. And they themselves are connected throughout the gospels, the two of them, in more than one place, the way Peter, James, and John are connected. But he was immediately introduced, Peter was, to Jesus by his brother. That's back when he was Simon. And Jesus, and he was introduced to Jesus as the Messiah. And Jesus changed his name to Peter, Cephas, actually, which is the Aramaic equivalent of rock, which in Greek is Peter. And that's how he came to be known to everybody in his lifetime, except Paul, who continues to call him Cephas his whole life. Anyway, um, um, so we've already talked about that. We're going to look at Matthew and Mark's account, mostly Matthew's account today. Luke's account tells us something else, something that we didn't know. But Matthew and Mark's account are essentially the same account. Matthew's is a little longer, so let me read Matthew's account and we'll talk about this. Walking by the Sea of Galilee, I'm in Matthew chapter 4, beginning with verse 18. Walking by the Sea of Galilee, he, that is Jesus, saw two brothers, Simon who was called Peter, well, not yet, Simon who was called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And immediately they left the nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the boat and their father and followed him. Well, these facts are borne out in all the Gospels, or at least in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. These facts are borne out, but there more detail we know from Luke. And when we add John to that, we get even more detail to the call. We're going to look at Luke's account next time. Let's talk about what we already know about Peter. Well, we know, and we'll talk about this next time, we know that he's married and that he has a mother-in-law who lives with him. In Luke's account, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law happens before Peter is called. In Matthew and Mark's account, it happens afterward. Let me just say something about the arrangement of events in the Gospels, because they're not always in the same chronological order. According to ancient historiography and the purpose of writing down histories and biographies, that's okay. Um, and even historians to this day will use flashback, will use fast forward, anachronism to tell a story and to tell it more vividly and to connect things together that are connected. And so we shouldn't be surprised that ancient writers do the same thing. And so just because Mark and Matthew place the healing of Peter's mother in law later in the account and at different times in the account than Luke does, it doesn't mean that they somehow disagree, because they absolutely agree word for word, verbatim, on what happened when Peter's mother was healed. It's just moving it around in the chronology serves a different purpose for the Gospels as they were written. So I hope that doesn't give you any heartburn. If it does, take an omeprazole, because there's nothing else to say about that. Um, anyway, so we know that he's married. We know that he has a mother-in-law, and we also know that he's not impoverished. He's not a day laborer. He's not a beggar on the streets. He's not a guy hoping to find work day by day to earn his denarius. He's a guy of some means. and that he and his brother together own and operate a boat on the Sea of Galilee. So he's a small businessman. He's working class, um, and he is in partnership, as we learn in Luke, with James and John, whose father also owns a boat. And so these two these two groups of men are in business together, and the fishing business on the Sea of Galilee was quite lucrative in the first century. The small fish were salted and preserved and shipped all over the Roman Empire. Um, and um, and so it was a quite lucrative business to be in. And you had to have earned some money to be able to own the 26-foot boat that they would have owned. A boat from the first century, a Galilean fishing boat from the first century, was uncovered on the beach of the Sea of Galilee just a few years ago. If you have an ESV study Bible, there will be a picture of that and a description of it, and it fits exactly the description of these boats that we have in the New Testament. Um, so it's simple, it's straightforward. Peter's the older brother. He's mentioned first. Peter is the first of the apostles, always to be mentioned. And Jesus calls Peter on this day when he's fishing with his brother and his partners. And on this day when Jesus says, "Follow me," they do follow him, and they leave their lives behind. Um, and we're going to talk about the rest of the story, to quote Paul Harvey, tomorrow, next time, I should say, when we are in Luke chapter 5, because there is quite a bit more to the story than Matthew tells us. But that's one of the reasons we have four Gospels anyway. So that's what we know from Matthew and Mark. We'll pick up with Luke 5 next time. Thank you for joining me for 5 good minutes with the Word.